Captain Jake Morrison looked out from the bridge of the human ship Endeavour as the massive alien space station grew bigger and bigger in front of them. The station was huge beyond anything humans had ever built. It stretched for miles in every direction with lights that sparkled like stars across its surface. Jake had been in space for 15 years, but this sight made him feel small and nervous. For 30 years, Earth had been sending radio signals into space hoping someone would answer. Back last year, the answer finally came, but it was not what anyone expected. The Galactic Council had sent a message to Earth telling them to come to the Council Station for a meeting. The message was polite, but it felt more like an order than an invitation. Ambassador Lisa Carter stood next to Jake on the bridge. She was a tall woman with gray hair and sharp eyes who had spent her whole life preparing for this moment. She wore her best blue uniform with the Earth flag on the shoulder, but Jake could see her hands shaking just a little bit. Lisa had been chosen to speak for all of humanity. Today behind them stood Dr. Kevin Hayes, the chief scientist from Earth. He carried a data pad filled with information about human technology and achievements. Kevin was nervous too, but he was trying to hide it by checking his notes over and over again. He had spent months preparing his presentation about what humans could offer to the galaxy. The Endeavour docked at the station with a soft bump that Jake barely felt through the ship. The airlock opened, and they walked into a corridor that was so big it could have fit 10 human ships inside it. The walls were made of some kind of crystal that glowed with soft light. The air tasted different here, cleaner somehow, but also strange. Other beings moved through the corridor, and Jake tried not to stare. Some looked like giant insects walking on 6 legs. Others floated in the air like ghosts made of light. There were creatures that looked like living rocks and things that seemed to be made of metal and wires. Each one was different, but they all moved with purpose, like they belonged here. The council chambers were even bigger than the corridor. Thousands of seats were arranged in circles that went up so high Jake could barely see. The top representatives from hundreds of worlds sat in those seats. Some were huge, some were tiny, but all of them were looking down at the small group of humans walking across the floor. Lisa Carter walked with her head high, even though Jake could tell she was scared. The humans were so small compared to most of the other beings in the chamber. Their simple uniforms looked plain next to the bright colors and strange materials worn by the aliens, but Lisa kept walking until she reached the center of the chamber, where a small platform waited for them. High Chancellor Vextel rose from his seat in the center of the chamber. He was tall and made of what looked like living crystal. His body caught the light and threw it back in rainbow patterns. When he spoke, his voice was deep and echoed through the chamber like thunder. "We welcome our newest members to the Galactic Council," Vextel said in words that somehow the humans could understand, "though we must say that your contribution to our great civilization remains to be seen." Whispers and strange sounds came from all around the chamber. The other beings were talking about the humans, but not in a friendly way. Jake heard words like primitive and backward and useless. Even though they were speaking in languages he did not know, the meaning was clear in their tone. A massive creature that looked like a giant insect with too many arms stood up from one of the lower seats. This was Hivemind Zarkus from the Korathian Empire. His voice made a clicking sound when he spoke. "These small mammals might be useful for simple work," Zarkus said. "They reproduce quickly and seem willing to follow orders. Perhaps they could work in our mining operations on dangerous worlds." Jake felt his face get hot with anger, but he said nothing. Lisa Carter stepped forward and spoke in a clear voice that carried through the chamber. "We thank the Council for welcoming us," she said. "Humanity is eager to share our knowledge and learn from the wisdom of older civilizations. We believe that every species has something unique to offer." A being made of pure energy floated down from the upper seats. This was Lumara. From the ethereal collective, she pulsed with different colors as she spoke. "Unique offerings from a species that has existed for only a few thousand years," Lumara said with what sounded like laughter. "How amusing your people have barely learned to leave their own world." More laughter came from around the chamber, not friendly laughter, but the kind that made Jake want to hide. The aliens were making fun of humanity right to their faces. They thought humans were nothing more than children playing at being grown-ups. The ceremony continued for hours. The humans were given a small space station on the edge of galaxy. where they could set up an embassy. They were granted basic trading rights, but nothing important. They were treated like pets that might be entertaining, but were not really part of the family. When it was over, the humans were escorted to temporary quarters on the station. Jake found Lisa standing by a window looking out at the stars. Her shoulders were stiff with anger and hurt. "They think we are nothing," she said quietly. "Just another primitive species that they can push around and ignore." Jake stood beside her and looked out at the same stars. "Maybe that is exactly what we need them to think," he said. "Let them underestimate us while we learn everything we can about them." Lisa turned to look at him. "You think we can prove them wrong?" "I think we have to," Jake said. "Because if we do not, they will never see us as equals. They will always think of us as the stupid humans from the small world who need to be told what to do." Outside the window, the stars continued to shine just as they had for billions of years, but now they seemed different somehow. They were no longer just points of light in the darkness. They were suns that warmed other worlds where other beings lived and thought and dreamed, and somewhere among those stars was Earth, where 7 billion humans were waiting to hear what their representatives had learned about their place in the galaxy. The news would not be good, but Jake Morrison and Lisa Carter and Kevin Hayes were not ready to give up. They had come too far and worked too hard to let the galaxy dismiss them so easily. Humanity had survived ice ages and wars and plagues and disasters. They had climbed out of caves and built cities and reached for the stars. If the galaxy thought humans were weak and stupid and useless, then the galaxy was about to learn something important about making assumptions. It was about to learn that the most dangerous thing you could do was underestimate a species that had nothing left to lose. 6 months had passed since humanity joined the Galactic Council, and things had gotten much worse. Commander Ryan Phillips sent his daily report back to Earth from the small human embassy station. His messages were full of anger and frustration at how the aliens treated humans. Every single day the other species in the galaxy had found new ways to make fun of humanity. Rich alien tourists now came to Earth like it was some kind of zoo. They would walk around human cities taking pictures and laughing at what they called primitive technology. They pointed at human cars and buildings and weapons like they were looking at toys made by children. The worst part was that Earth needed the aliens more than the aliens needed Earth. Human technology was hundreds of years behind what the rest of the galaxy used. Everyday ships from other worlds brought medicine and computers and tools that could help humanity, but the aliens only gave humans the old broken things they did not want anymore. Dr. Amanda Torres worked in the Human Research Center on the embassy station. She tried every day to get the alien scientists to work with her on projects that could help both species, but every time she presented an idea, the aliens would laugh and tell her to go play with her simple human toys. They had science that could cure diseases and extend life and travel between stars in minutes, but they shared none of it with humans. The situation got much worse when the hegemony of scales came to Earth with a special request. The reptilian aliens were big and strong and covered in green scales that looked like armor. Their leader was a massive creature named General Sothkar, who spoke in a voice that sounded like rocks grinding. Together, General Sothkar met with the human leaders in New York City. He sat in a chair that was too small for him and looked down at the humans like they were insects. His yellow eyes never blinked as he talked. "The hegemony requires soldiers for our expansion into new territories," Sothkar said. "Human warriors will serve in our armies as we claim new worlds for our empire. This is a great honor for your species." The human leaders knew this was not really a request, it was an order wrapped in polite words. If Earth said no, the aliens might cut off all trade and leave humanity alone in space again. But if Earth said yes, they would be sending their young men and women to die in wars. They had no part in starting. General Frank Peterson was the head of Earth's military forces. He was a tough old soldier who had fought in 3 wars, but he had never faced anything like this. The aliens wanted to use human soldiers like they were disposable tools that could be thrown away when they broke. "They want us to be their attack dogs," Ambassador Lisa Carter explained to the emergency meeting of world leaders. "We breed fast and die young, so they think we are perfect for dangerous missions. If we lose 1,000 soldiers, they will just ask for 1,000 more." President Karen Walsh looked at the reports with a sick feeling in her stomach. The galaxy saw humans as nothing more than a useful resource like oil or metal or wood. They could be harvested and used up, and nobody would care when they were gone. The ethereal collective was no better than the others. They sent humans on dangerous missions to explore parts of space that might kill anyone who went there. When human ships disappeared, the energy beings would just shrug and say that was the risk of exploration. They never sent their own people on these missions. Young Lieutenant Danny Cooper had just graduated from the Space Academy, and he was already tired of how the aliens treated humans. He worked on the embassy station and saw every day how the other species looked at humans like they were servants or pets. We clean their stations and fight their wars and explore their dangerous places, Danny said to his friend Lieutenant Carol Martinez, but they never let us sit at the big table where real decisions are made. We are the galaxy's janitors, and they laugh at us while we work. But while the galaxy was busy laughing at humans, some people were paying attention to things that others missed: intelligence. Officer Claire Martinez spent her days watching and listening and writing down everything she saw. She noticed that alien technology was not as perfect as they claimed. She saw that their ships had weaknesses and their weapons had limits. Engineer Pete Rodriguez worked on every piece of alien equipment that came through human hands. He took apart their tools and studied their computers and learned how their engines worked. The aliens thought humans were too stupid to understand advanced technology, but Pete was learning their secrets piece by piece. Dr. Kevin Hayes traveled to different alien worlds as part of cultural exchange programs. The aliens let him come because they thought it was funny to watch a primitive human try to understand their civilization, but Kevin was not there to be entertained. He was there to learn about their history and their politics and their fears. What Kevin learned was that the great alien civilizations were not as great as they pretended to be. The Korathian Empire was fighting 3 different civil wars. The Zephyrian Crystal people were slowly dying because their homestar was getting old. The ethereal collective was splitting apart because different groups wanted different things. The aliens had been in space for millions of years, and they had grown comfortable and lazy. They had forgotten what it was like to struggle and fight and work hard for survival. They had advanced technology, but they had lost the drive and creativity that had made them great in the first place. Meanwhile, humans were still hungry and angry and desperate. They had only been in space for a few decades, but they were learning and growing and adapting faster than anyone expected. The aliens thought human weakness was that they were young and primitive, but they were wrong. Human strength was that they were young and primitive. While the galaxy mocked humans for being simple and violent and unpredictable, those same qualities were making humans stronger. The aliens had forgotten how to take risks and try new things and think outside the rules, but humans had never learned to follow rules in the first place. Commander Ryan Phillips finished his report and sent it back to Earth. The message was the same. As always, the aliens still treated humans like children and servants and expendable tools. But buried in the report were small details that careful readers might notice: details about alien weaknesses and failures and fears. Back on Earth, military leaders and scientists and intelligence officers read these reports very carefully. They were building a picture of the galaxy that was very different from what the aliens wanted humans to see. The great civilizations were not as strong as they appeared, and the primitive humans were not as weak as everyone believed. The galaxy had made a mistake when they decided to mock humanity. They had given humans access to their technology and their worlds and their secrets while assuming that humans were too stupid to understand any of it. But humans had been watching and learning and preparing for something that the aliens could never imagine. The day would come when the galaxy would need the species they had dismissed as worthless, and when that day came, humans would be ready to show everyone what they were really capable of. The first warning came from the edge of known space, where human colonies had been placed as buffer zones between the civilized galaxy and the darkness beyond. Captain Monica Stewart worked at a deep space monitoring station called Watchdog that was built on a small asteroid floating in empty space. Monica had been watching the stars for 2 years, and she knew what normal space looked like. The energy readings on her screens were always the same boring patterns of distant suns and planets, and the occasional ship passing through. But on a cold Tuesday morning, everything changed. The Sensors picked up massive energy signatures moving through the darkness between stars. The readings were so strong that Monica thought her equipment was broken. She ran every test she could think of, but the instruments kept showing the same impossible results. Something huge was out there in the empty space between galaxies, something that generated more energy than a small star but moved with purpose and direction toward the inhabited worlds. Monica called Dr. Benjamin Clark, the station's expert on alien life forms. Dr. Clark was a quiet man who had spent his whole career studying the different species in the galaxy. He knew about creatures that could live in the vacuum of space and beings that fed on radiation and energy. But when he looked at Monica's readings, he could not explain what they were seeing. These readings show biological signatures, Dr. Clark said while staring at the data. But nothing biological could survive in deep space without a ship or protective equipment, and nothing biological could be this big. The energy output suggests something the size of a moon. Monica sent urgent messages to the nearest inhabited systems, warning them about the strange readings, but the alien governments dismissed her reports as equipment failure or human confusion. The Korathian Empire sent back a message telling her to stop wasting their time with false alarms. The first system to go dark was called Kepler 7. It was a small mining colony owned by the Zephyrian Empire with about 50,000 workers living on 3 different planets. The system had regular communication schedules and trade ships that arrived every few days. When the scheduled communication failed to come through the Zephyrian, authorities assumed it was a technical problem. Communication equipment broke down all the time, especially in remote mining systems, but when the emergency backup systems also went silent, they began to worry. The second system was called New Carthage, and it was much bigger than Kepler 7. It had 5 planets with over 2 million inhabitants and a major military base that protected the trade routes in that sector. When New Carthage went silent, the aliens could no longer ignore what was happening. Admiral Troy Henderson commanded the military base at New Carthage, and he was one of the few alien officers who respected human capabilities. He had worked with human soldiers and found them to be brave and clever fighters. When the strange energy signatures appeared on his sensors, he immediately sent a message to the Galactic Council. "This is Admiral Henderson reporting from New Carthage," his message said. "We are under attack by unknown forces. These are not ships as we understand them. These are living creatures the size of battle cruisers that can survive in space without life support. They move in coordinated groups, and they are heading directly for populated worlds." The message was cut off in the middle of a sentence, and New Carthage joined the growing list of dead systems. The aliens could no longer pretend that this was a technical problem or a terrorist attack. Something was hunting the civilized worlds, and it was getting closer to the core systems. Every day the third system to fall was called Haven Point, and this time there were survivors. A badly damaged rescue ship managed to escape just as the system died. The crew was made up of different alien species, and they were all terrified by what they had seen. The ship's captain was a Korathian named Hivemind Dextar, who had commanded warships for 30 years. He had fought in major battles and seen terrible weapons, but nothing had prepared him for what attacked Haven Point. "They are not using technology," Dextar reported to the emergency session of the Galactic Council. "They are technology living creatures that can travel faster than light without ships. They consume everything in their path, stars, planets, entire solar systems. All of it gets absorbed into their bodies." The beings that would later be called the Devourers had found the galaxy. They moved like a swarm of hungry locusts across the stars, converting matter into energy to fuel their endless appetite. They did not communicate and they did not negotiate. They simply consumed everything they encountered. Panic spread through the council chambers as more reports came in from the surviving systems. The greatest military forces in the galaxy were mobilized to fight this new threat. The Zephyrian Empire sent their crystal ships powered by star cores. The Korathian Hivemind deployed their bioships that had evolved over millions of years. The ethereal collective gathered their energy weapons that could destroy planets, but every force sent against the Devourers was defeated. The crystal ships were shattered like glass. The bioships were turned against their creators. The energy weapons passed through the Devourers without causing any damage. Chancellor Vextel's crystalline body showed cracks of stress as he addressed the emergency session. Our conventional weapons are useless against them, they adapt. To everything we use against them, they learn from our attacks and become stronger. They are consuming our greatest fleets and using our own technology against us. The Devourers had abilities that seemed impossible. They could absorb any form of energy and convert it to strengthen themselves. They could adapt to any weapon within hours of first contact. They could communicate instantly across vast distances and coordinate attacks with perfect precision. Dr. Helen Morgan was one of the few human observers allowed in the council chambers. She watched as the greatest civilizations in the galaxy struggled to understand an enemy that could not be reasoned with or negotiated with or defeated through normal means. The aliens had built their entire civilization on the idea that intelligence and technology could solve any problem. They had advanced science and powerful weapons and millions of years of experience, but the Devourers were something completely different. They were not interested in conquest or territory or resources. They were interested only in consumption. As system after system fell to the advancing swarm, the surviving species began to realize that they might be facing extinction. The Devourers moved faster than any fleet could retreat. They struck without warning and left nothing behind but empty space where stars and planets had once existed. The human colonies in the Outer Rim found themselves on the front lines of a war that threatened to destroy all life in the galaxy. The species that had been mocked and dismissed as primitive were suddenly the first and last line of defense against an enemy that the advanced civilizations could not defeat. Monica Stewart continued to track the Devourers from her monitoring station. She watched as they consumed system after system, moving ever closer to the core worlds where billions of beings lived in cities that had stood for thousands of years. They are not random, she reported to anyone who would listen. They have a pattern. They are moving toward the most populated systems they can sense where life is concentrated, and they are hunting us. The galaxy that had laughed at humanity for being young and violent and unpredictable now faced an enemy that was older and more violent and completely unpredictable. The great civilizations that had mocked humans for being primitive were about to learn that sometimes primitive solutions were the only solutions that worked in the darkness between stars. The Devourers continued their relentless advance toward the heart of galactic civilization, and in the small human outposts scattered along the rim, brave men and women prepared to face an enemy that their supposed superiors could not even understand. Half the galaxy was gone, and the Devourers were moving faster than ever before. The council chambers that once held hundreds of representatives from different worlds now had less than 50 beings, huddled together in fear. The great civilizations that had ruled space for millions of years were running out of time and options. High Chancellor Vextel looked older than his 1,000 years. His crystalline body had lost its bright shine, and deep cracks ran along his surface like scars. The stress of watching his civilization die was breaking him apart piece by piece. We have tried everything, Vextel announced to the desperate assembly. Our greatest scientists, our most powerful weapons, our most advanced strategies all have failed. The Devourers learn from every attack we make against them. They become stronger with each battle we fight. The ethereal collective's representative, Lumara, flickered weakly like a candle in the wind. Her energy form could barely hold together as fear drained her power. They adapt to our weapons faster than we can build new ones, she said. Every strategy we use teaches them how to defend against similar attacks. We are fighting an enemy that becomes smarter every time we try to hurt them. The surviving alien leaders had gathered their remaining fleets at the fortress world of Kefmoran. This was supposed to be the final stand where the greatest military minds in the galaxy would make their last desperate attempt to stop the Devourers. But everyone knew it was hopeless. In the back of the chamber, Ambassador Lisa Carter stood up slowly. The aliens around her barely noticed her presence. After all, what could primitive humans possibly offer when the most advanced civilizations had already failed? The idea seemed so ridiculous that most beings did not even look in her direction. There might be another way, Lisa said in a clear voice that carried through the chamber. The reaction was immediate, and harsh, angry clicking sounds came from the Korathian delegates. Dismissive energy pulses came from the ethereals. Contemptuous hisses came from the reptilian hegemony. The suggestion that humans could succeed where everyone else had failed was beyond belief of mine. Zarkus turned his compound eyes toward Lisa with barely hidden anger. What could your species possibly contribute? He demanded. You have no advanced weapons, no evolved biology, no sophisticated technology. You are barely more than animals, Lisa remained calm even though Jake Morrison could see her hands shaking slightly. You are right, she admitted. We do not have any of those things, but we have something else. Something you have all forgotten after millions of years of civilization, she activated. A small holographic projector that showed scenes from Earth's history, images of humans fighting against impossible odds and winning through determination and cleverness. The aliens watched with growing confusion as the primitive species demonstrated tactics they had never considered. We know how to fight dirty, Lisa explained. We know how to survive when everyone says we cannot. We know how to win when we should lose, and most importantly, we know how to think in ways that others do not expect. The hologram showed human military history from ancient battles to modern warfare, humans using terrain and weather and psychology as weapons. Humans turning their enemies' strengths against them, humans finding victory through methods that no civilized species would ever consider. Captain Jake Morrison stepped forward with data tablets showing months of careful analysis. We have been studying the Devourers since they first appeared, he said. They adapt to direct attacks, but they follow patterns. They have behaviors and weaknesses that none of you have noticed because you fight them like honorable civilized beings. Dr. Kevin Hayes joined them at the center of the chamber. The Devourers are not just consuming matter, they are consuming information. Every time you attack them conventionally, you teach them how to defend against conventional attacks, but humans have never been conventional. The chamber erupted in heated debate. Some delegates were curious, despite themselves, while others insisted that trusting humanity was madness. The Korathians clicked angrily about giving command to inferior beings. The ethereals pulsed with confusion about human irrationality, but the desperate situation was clear to everyone. The greatest fleets in the galaxy had been destroyed, the most advanced weapons had proven useless, the smartest military commanders had failed completely. Time was running out, and the Devourers were getting closer to the core worlds every day. General Frank Peterson had been quietly listening from the back of the chamber. Now he walked forward with the confidence of a soldier who had fought in many impossible battles. Give us command of your remaining forces, he said simply, not as servants or expendable troops, but as the leaders of this war. Let us fight this enemy the human way. The silence that followed was so complete that Jake could hear his own heartbeat. The galaxy's most advanced civilizations were being asked to submit to the leadership of the species they had mocked for being primitive and stupid. High Chancellor Vexthal looked around the chamber at the faces of beings who had ruled star systems when humans were still living in caves. The pride of millions of years was hard to swallow, but the alternative was extinction. What exactly do you propose? Vexthal asked finally. Lisa's smile was grim but determined. We propose asymmetric warfare. Psychological operations, strategic deception, hit and run tactics. We propose fighting this war in ways the Devourers cannot predict or adapt to, because no rational species would ever fight this way. The Korathian Admiral Hivemind Klextar buzzed with outrage. You want us to fight without honor, without proper strategy, without following the established rules of warfare. The established rules are getting you killed. Jake replied bluntly. The Devourers have adapted to every honorable strategy you have tried. Honor and proper rules and established tactics are useless against an enemy that learns from everything you do. Dr. Helen Morgan had been taking notes throughout the discussion. Now she spoke up from her position as observer. The Devourers expect rational responses to their attacks. They have evolved to counter logical military thinking, but human military thinking is not always logical. Pete Rodriguez, the engineer, stepped forward with technical drawings. We have ideas for weapons and tactics that no advanced civilization would ever consider. They are dangerous, unpredictable, and completely insane, but that might be exactly what we need. The debate continued for hours as alien delegates struggled with the idea of following human leadership. Some argued that desperation was making them consider foolish options. Others pointed out that conventional wisdom had already failed completely. Finally, Lumara pulsed with resigned acceptance. "We are facing extinction," she said. "If there is any chance that human methods might succeed, then we must try our pride is worth." Less than our survival, one by one the remaining delegates agreed. The decision was driven more by hopelessness than confidence, but it was a decision. The galaxy's most advanced species would follow the leadership of the primitives they had dismissed as. The session ended. Jake Morrison looked out at the stars that still shone beyond the chamber. Soon those stars would either be saved by human ingenuity or consumed by the Devourers along with everything else, but for the first time since the crisis began, humanity had a chance to prove what they were really capable of. The galaxy had mocked humans until they needed them. Now they would discover whether that need could be answered by the species everyone had underestimated. Against all logic and most of their better judgment, the Galactic Council gave humanity command of the war against the Devourers. The decision came from pure desperation, but it was still a decision that changed everything. General Frank Peterson set up his headquarters on the fortress world of Kethmoran, where the last great fleets of the galaxy waited for orders. The alien commanders, who now had to follow human leadership, were not happy about it. Admiral Hivemind Klextar from the Korathian Empire clicked his mandibles angrily every time he had to salute a human officer. Commander Silthara from the Ethereal Collective flickered with barely controlled rage when she received orders from beings she considered primitive, but they followed orders anyway because the alternative was watching their entire civilization get eaten by monsters from the void. Peterson's strategy was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of massive fleet battles and direct confrontation, he ordered what he called guerrilla warfare. Small groups of ships would attack the Devourers, then retreat before the enemy could adapt. Hit-and-run tactics that seemed cowardly to the aliens but served a hidden purpose. Commander Ryan Phillips led the first operation with a mixed fleet of human and alien vessels. His orders were simple: attack the Devourers, then run away when they fight back. Do not try to win, just confuse them and make them angry. The alien officers thought this was insane. Captain Velenok from the Zephyrian crystal ships protested loudly. "This is not warfare, this is cowardice. We should stand and fight with honor, not flee like frightened children." But Phillips followed his orders exactly. He led his fleet against a small group of Devourers near the Rigel system. The ships fired everything they had for exactly 3 minutes, then jumped away to safety. The Devourers gave chase but found nothing but empty space. "What was the point of that attack?" demanded Admiral Klextar when the fleet returned. "We caused minimal damage and accomplished nothing. We looked like fools running away from battle, Doctor." Amanda Torres was monitoring the Devourer reactions from the command center. She had been watching their behavior patterns for months and was starting to see something that the aliens missed. "They are learning," she reported to Peterson. "But they are learning the wrong lessons. We are teaching them to expect random, chaotic attacks from cowards. The real genius of the human strategy became clear when Captain Monica Stewart executed the second phase of the plan. She used holographic projectors and gravity mines to create false targets across 3 different star systems. The fake ships looked real on sensors, but they were just light and energy with nothing solid inside. The Devourers had adapted to expect chaotic human hit-and-run attacks, so they charged into the holographic maze looking for the real threats. What they found instead was a carefully planned trap that led them toward a region of space where Dr. Benjamin Clark had been preparing something special. The beauty of this plan, Clark explained to the horrified alien observers, is that it is completely crazy. No rational species would ever consider using black hole generators as weapons because they are too dangerous. But humans are not always rational. The artificial black hole opened in the middle of the Devourer formation and began pulling everything nearby into its crushing gravity. The creatures that could absorb energy and adapt to any weapon found themselves being stretched and compressed by forces that even they could not resist. Several dozen Devourers were destroyed in the first few seconds, but that was not the real victory. The important thing was how the surviving Devourers reacted to this new threat. They immediately began adapting their biology to resist gravitational weapons. Lieutenant Danny Cooper monitored the enemy communications from his post on the command ship. He watched with satisfaction as the Devourers' collective consciousness processed the black hole encounter. They are changing their entire structure to defend Against gravity weapons, he reported, they are making themselves heavier and more resistant to gravitational pulls. Peterson smiled grimly as he received the report. Perfect, he said. Now they are ready for Phase 3. The aliens were completely confused by the human strategy. Admiral Kleckstar demanded an explanation. Why are you celebrating the fact that they adapted to our weapons that makes them harder to kill, not easier? Engineer Pete Rodriguez was working on the real weapon in a secret laboratory deep inside. Keth Morin, because Phase 3 has nothing to do with black holes, he explained while putting the finishing touches on his creation. While they waste energy defending against gravity weapons, we hit them with something completely different. The device Rodriguez had built looked simple, but it was based on principles that the galaxy's greatest scientists had never considered. It was a quantum virus designed to attack the Devourers' communication network. The same network that allowed them to share information and adapt so quickly could be turned against them. Dr. Helen Morgan had spent months mapping how the Devourers shared information across their collective consciousness. They used quantum entanglement to communicate instantly across vast distances, but that same quantum connection could carry more than just information. It could carry viruses. The virus will not destroy them, Morgan explained to the mixed fleet commanders. Instead, it will confuse their adaptation protocols. They will think they are under attack by weapons that do not exist and waste energy defending against imaginary threats. Intelligence Officer Claire Martinez had identified the perfect time and place to deploy the virus. The Devourers always sent scout groups ahead of their main force to test enemy defenses. The scouts would be perfect carriers to spread the infection back to the larger swarm. The deployment began 3 days later. Captain Jake Morrison led a small fleet that appeared to be retreating from the advancing Devourers. The enemy scouts followed eagerly, thinking they were pursuing frightened humans who had given up the fight. When the quantum virus was released, the scouts absorbed it along with everything else they encountered. The virus looked like harmless energy, so the Devourers' natural defenses ignored it completely. By the time they realized what had happened, the infection was already spreading through their quantum network. The effect was immediate and devastating. The Devourers' collective consciousness became chaos as contradictory information flooded their communication system. They began defending against energy weapons that did not exist while leaving themselves open to conventional attacks. They had already learned to counter. Some Devourers thought they were being attacked by gravity weapons and made themselves heavier. Others thought they were facing plasma weapons and developed heat resistance. Still others prepared for attacks that existed only in the virus-infected parts of their shared mind. The greatest strength of the Devourers had become their greatest weakness. Their ability to share information instantly meant that confusion spread just as quickly as knowledge. When the virus made them believe in false threats, they all believed. At the same time, Peterson watched the chaos through his command screens as the most dangerous enemy in galactic history tore itself apart, trying to defend against attacks that were not happening. Sometimes, he said to the amazed alien officers, the best way to win a war is to make your enemy defeat themselves. The quantum virus spread through the Devourer network like wildfire in a dry forest. Within hours, their collective consciousness was drowning in false information and imaginary threats. The creatures that had seemed unstoppable were now fighting battles that existed only in their infected minds. Captain Jake Morrison watched the chaos unfold on his command screens as confused Devourers began attacking empty space. They fired energy blasts at targets that were not there and defended against weapons that had never been built. Their perfect coordination became complete disorder as the virus made them see enemies everywhere. Dr. Helen Morgan monitored the virus spread from her laboratory deep inside the fortress world. The infection rate is beyond our best predictions, she reported to General Peterson. Every Devourer in contact with the quantum network is now receiving corrupted data. They cannot tell the difference between real threats and false ones. The time had come for the final assault. Peterson gathered his mixed fleet of human and alien ships for what would either be the galaxy's salvation or its final defeat. The Devourers were vulnerable for the first time since they had appeared, but the window of opportunity would not last forever. All ships prepare for a coordinated attack. Peterson ordered over the communication network. Remember, they are confused, but they are still dangerous. Do not give them time to adapt to our real weapons. Admiral Klextar from the Korathian Empire had been skeptical of human tactics from the beginning, but now he watched in amazement as the impossible became reality. The humans have done what our greatest military minds said could not be done, he reported to his hive. Mind, they have turned the Devourer's strength against them. Captain Monica Stewart led the first wave of ships against the virus-infected Devourers. Her sensors showed enemy creatures firing wildly in all directions as they fought imaginary attackers. The real fleet approached unnoticed because the Devourers thought they were already fighting a dozen different battles. The attack began with conventional weapons that the Devourers had learned to counter months ago, but the virus had confused their adaptation protocols so much that they could not remember how to defend against simple energy blasts and missile attacks. Their own success at learning had been turned into failure. Commander Ryan Phillips coordinated the second wave as Devourer. After Devourer fell to weapons they should have been able to resist. They are trying to adapt, but the virus keeps giving them wrong information, he reported. Every time they develop a defense, the virus tells them they need something completely different. The battle that should have been impossible was becoming a victory. The creatures that had consumed half the galaxy were being destroyed by their own confusion. They had become so focused on fighting threats that did not exist that they could not defend against the threats that were real. Dr. Amanda Torres tracked the remaining Devourer groups from the command center. The virus is spreading faster than they can contain it, she announced. Each group that tries to help the infected ones becomes infected themselves. They cannot stop the spread without cutting off all communication, but cutting off communication would mean losing the coordination that made them so dangerous. The Devourers faced an impossible choice: stay connected and remain confused, or disconnect and become vulnerable to conventional attacks. Either way, they would lose. Lieutenant Danny Cooper watched as the last major Devourer formation tried desperately to purge the virus from their network. They are attempting to reset their collective consciousness, he reported, but the virus has integrated too deeply into their quantum communications. The final Devourer died 3 hours after the battle began. Its massive form went dark and drifted silently through space like a dead whale floating on an ocean. The creature that had once consumed entire star systems was now just another piece of cosmic debris. Silence filled the command center as the reality of victory settled over everyone present. The galaxy's greatest threat had been defeated not by superior technology or overwhelming force, but by human cleverness and the willingness to fight in ways that others considered impossible. High Chancellor Vexel's crystalline form pulsed with what might have been humility as he addressed the emergency council session. We owe our continued existence to the species we called primitive. He admitted their unconventional thinking and willingness to take impossible risks saved us all when our advanced methods failed. The surviving alien delegates looked at the humans with new understanding. Ambassador Lisa Carter no longer seemed like a representative from a backward world. She was the voice of the species that had saved galactic civilization when no one else could. Humanity asks for nothing more than we should have been given from the beginning, Lisa said to the assembled delegates. We want respect, equality, and the right to contribute our ideas to our shared future. We do not seek to rule over others, but we will not accept being ruled over either. The ethereal collectives Lumara pulsed with genuine warmth for the first time since meeting humans. Your species has shown us that wisdom does not come from age or technology, but from the courage to think differently when everything depends on it. Commander Sothara, who had been angry about following human orders, now saluted Peterson with genuine respect. You taught us that there are no rules in war except the rule to survive and protect what matters most. As the council session ended, the galaxy's view of humanity had changed completely. They were no longer the amusing primitives from the outer rim, but the species that had achieved the impossible when it mattered most. The creatures that had been mocked for being young and violent and unpredictable had used those same qualities to save everyone. Jake Morrison stood beside Lisa Carter, looking out at stars that would continue to shine because of human courage and creativity. They will never underestimate us again, he said quietly. Good, Lisa replied, because we have a lot more to offer than they ever imagined. The galaxy had learned the hardest lesson of all, that mocking others for being different was not just wrong but dangerous. The species they had dismissed as worthless had become their saviors, and the universe was a better place, because humans had refused to accept the limits that others tried to place on them. In the end, humanity had proven that sometimes the most important victories come not from following the rules, but from being brave enough to break them, when breaking them means saving everyone else.